Hey there, total transformation people and triple A's. Hi tribe. I hope you guys are having an amazing week so far. And I just wanted to jump on and do a recording outside because it was quite sunny here. Sorry if my computer is a little bit unstable. Yeah, I just wanted to jump on and talk about sabotage and how it actually shows up in your life whilst you guys are going through changes in your world and changing beliefs and habits and things like that. So yeah, awesome. I hope you guys enjoy it. But just first of all, we're into week 3 of the challenge, and it's already flying past, and you guys are doing an incredible job already, so you should be really proud of yourselves. We are immensely proud of you guys for showing up continually and really asking questions and getting involved, which is really good to see. That's what we want from everybody. So just keep the Facebook conversations going, and really kind of, if there is anything that comes up that you are unsure of, or you want to have that support network around you, please use the Facebook group. So just keep those feeds coming all the time. Engagement, that's what we want. So like I said, what I wanted to talk about in this video was that little word called sabotage. And sometimes, you know, what happens with sabotage is what I wanted to kind of flag with you guys is that even though we are making some, you know, when we find ourselves making some amazing, groundbreaking achievements and, you know, we're starting to see results, we're starting to get enthusiastic. This video is about just kind of being mindful around, so I'm just trying to fix the sunlight, being mindful around what's happening whilst these new pathways are being formed in your brain. Because they're not completely, I guess, paved at the moment, for lack of a better term. Think of it as like, you know, treading down new paths in your brain, and making and kind of allowing the old habits to well, I guess not to over, like to be grown over, like to, for the, think of it as like a grass path, and your current habits are quite easily and accessible. We can walk down there, it's pretty clear, you can see it, and these new formed habits are the new paths that we're trying to build in our brain. So sort of like that analogy. So forming our brain is forming that new path in our brain. Then that pathway isn't quite distinctive just yet. And this part of our brain is called the critter brain, which I will touch on a little bit more in a moment. So like I said, it's about continuously walking down that unworn path to make sure that it is more worn over time and it becomes clearer and more obvious and more easily accessible. And the other old habits just become, or old paths become, unrecognizable and no longer necessary to actually use. So this is kind of a roundabout way of how we sort of, I mean, I guess in its most simplest form, of how we change habits and shift our beliefs. And to do this, it obviously takes time. You know, we can come in with a lawnmower and, you know, instantly create new neuro pathways through our brain. But in real life, that's just not going to happen. We need to gradually tread down these new roads that we're walking down. Otherwise, a part of our brain will just get freaked out and we spring back into old habits. So understand that sometimes these new paths we're trying to create may seem a little hard because we have to do the manual work in order to have them created. And these can sometimes show up as feeling uncomfortable to create, and the old paths just are so much easier. It kind of like, part of your brain is kind of like, well, hey, that's already there. Why do I have to keep doing this new found route to get me through to the end destination. Because we always want comfort, right? Our bodies and our minds are designed to want comfort and pleasure. That's just the way we're wired. So what we want to kind of do is think of it in a way that at the end of that new path that we're creating is, even though it's not quite clear yet, everything that we want, that we desire, that we put in our desired list is at the end of that path. And that's why it's well worth continuously walking down that and creating a clearer, more accessible, more simplistic road for ourselves. And the choices that you want to move away from are the ones that are at the end of that current accessible path. So it's all about just constantly bringing these new habits into our world so that they are eventually just effortless. Okay, so where does sabotage fit into all of this? I'm getting to that. Sorry, guys, that was kind of like a long, convoluted way of actually bringing you guys to the subject that I wanted to talk about. So think of a time when you have been in a situation when you had set yourself a goal, say it, to lose weight or get fit, become stronger, or make any sort of change that you want in your life. And we can see that, we're making progress, and we can see it, you're like, wow, this is awesome. It feels really great. I can see that, I'm starting to feel lighter in myself. I'm starting to feel stronger. I'm starting to, choose better options. And then all of a sudden we have a setback. Things come up in life and we fall back into old ruts, and we become demotivated again, and we stop doing those things that were actually getting us to where we wanted to end up and getting us closer to that end goal. So then we simply just give up and think that we're hopeless and that we shouldn't have even bothered in the first place because there's no way we're actually going to make these changes. So the first thing, so if this is anything that you guys have ever experienced, I just want to kind of nip that in the butt right now before it actually happens. And if you have experienced it, this is also just to highlight what is actually going on and know that it's completely normal. So it's, just bringing awareness to that situation when it does rise, and rather than, writing yourself off as a person that just doesn't have the willpower, just know that it's completely normal, and all you need to do is get back on the bandwagon, because we are going to slip up. So here's what's happening inside the brain whilst all of these self-sabotaging thoughts are going through. So all humans have 3 brains: the critter brain, the limbic system, and the cortex. And the critter brain is your fight, flight, or freeze reaction. And it doesn't actually like change. So its job is to actually keep us safe and alive. And even if that safety isn't necessarily in alignment with those habits that we want to kind of work towards, it doesn't really care. It doesn't see it as necessary to change, because right now you're alive, it's doing its job. It knows, it's kind of like, well, my job's done here and everything's in perfect harmony. The limbic system is the emotional part of your brain, and it creates the feeling of love and belonging. And it can also create the other side of anger and needs to know that change isn't a threat. Because when it sees when it sees change as a threat, that's when it's going to kind of work with your critter brain. And the other third one is the cortex, and this is the part that likes to rationalize our choices, good or bad, whatever they are. And it deals with the logical human conscious part of the mind. And its job for us is to basically justify our choices and behaviors, and then make meaning out of the feelings that we're actually experiencing. So, you could be faced with a situation where you are going back into old habits like sleeping in and not wanting to make that extra session. And it's like, well, I skipped a couple of sessions this week, so I may as well just ride this week off and we'll start again next week. And it kind of brings that, okay, yeah, that's fair enough. Let's just, that seems reasonable. We'll start again next week. So with regards to the critter brain, when it senses change equals unknown equals unsafe. And the critter brain likes things to stay the same. However, the conscious mind loves change and can feel guilt and shame for not actually following through, which leads to punishing attempts of redemption. For example, if we were, if you have, another example would be if you have a binging session, for instance, and then you beat yourself up with shameful thoughts like, I'm bad, I suck, I'm a loser, and what's the point? I'm never going to change these bad habits. What might happen then is we make a deal with ourselves to not eat anything for the next 24 hours, and then go and do a 3-hour workout, just so that we can feel good about ourselves again. But then it becomes this toxic cycle where we're constantly continuing to do these things to ourselves, and it's not healthy. It's not really a sustainable way to live. I'm not saying fasting isn't a sustainable way to live. It's just those bad habits or those bad negative thoughts that we kind of put into our mind. But realistically, falling off track doesn't actually mean you're a bad person. And beating ourselves up for messing ups is just a way of self-sabotaging and kind of self-loathing and punishment and judgment. And they're not pathways to actually healing and having positive thoughts in our mind and really kind of self-acceptance, which sets us up for change. It's kind of like waging war with ourselves, and that's never going to work. So rather than judging and shaming ourselves, I want you guys to kind of think of these times as opportunities to learn more about what's going on in your mind and how you can, and what's happening and why you're actually feeling like, I need to have that extra piece of chocolate cake, or I need to have, more sleep because I'm tired. What's going on in your external environment that's actually leading you to make those choices that not necessarily align to the goals that you want to have. And like I said, these are all opportunities to step back from the situation and get curious and have compassion towards why you're actually making these choices in the first place. Because we're all going to fall off track. And if you don't, that is amazing. But if you do, it is absolutely completely fine as well, because we're all human. And vices and sabotages and being naughty, what we deem as being naughty, are just all part of, life's beautiful experience. And we can, so when the critter brain does sense change, self-sabotage can occur. And change can be, we all know, is a challenge, can be a challenging thing, because it requires us to let go of certain things that we become attached to. And, attached to, and we kind of hold a value to, because it has a meaning and a purpose that we feel like is warranted in our life, even if it's something that we deep down feel like we don't want to do. On the surface level, we don't really want to do it, but deep down it does have an attachment and a meaning to it. So that's when I'm, encourage you guys to think about what that meaning actually is. Some of the reasons we might experience self-sabotage is that something else always seems more important, which means you're not putting yourself first and you don't see yourself as a priority. You're choosing others' needs over your own, when you really just could have, shuffled things around to ensure that you were number one priority. Desiring acceptance as well, maybe from a friend, family, or work colleagues, whereby you don't want to upset anybody So you choose to say yes to something that you really didn't want to say yes to in the first place. So you're accommodating others' needs over your own. You know, the fact is that this is your health and you are important. You're the most important person in all of this. So when this happens, you can sense this happening because you're going over to a friend's house or over to a family's house. Just try and step back and remind yourselves of the goals and let them know, because they're probably really supportive as well. And the other one is that, you know, I've been good, so I deserve a little extra. So, you know, it's kind of like that reward for us. It is still type of a sabotage when that shows up and everything starts to feel really good, a little too good. So we're like, oh, well, this is good. And that too good feeling can also feel unfamiliar to us because we're not used to it. And then the critter brain freaks out because it's like, uh-oh, something's going on, something's starting to change. So this is when it's really important to bring yourself back into balance and not try and do so much at once, and just slowly introducing these little changes to your world and doing whatever makes you feel like comfortable. So regardless of how self-sabotage shows up for you, this is your job, just to recognize when it's actually happening and get curious about what's going on. So there is a handout and it's got 3 questions that I want you guys to answer in your own time, and I'll obviously share in that Facebook group because we want to kind of talk about it as well and start to understand ourselves. So the self-sabotage handout will be posted in the Facebook group. And the first question is that what are all the good reasons for getting what I want? So this is when, you know, you can connect back to your why. Why is it that you actually want to have this outcome in the first place? And then what are all the bad reasons for getting what you want? Now this is, you know, for those of you who aren't really sure what do you mean, like when I say what are all the bad reasons, some examples just to help get you guys started is, if I lose weight, I won't know how to keep it off. It will be too hard. I don't know how to keep up with the regime. Or I'll just be waiting you've already kind of convinced yourself that you're just going to fall off the bandwagon again anyway and you can't keep this up. Which is, you know, just a belief that you keep entertaining. And remember, all beliefs is just something that we keep telling ourselves over and over again, which means we can tell ourselves whatever we want to believe. The other one is, you know, you'll feel you'll always be hungry if you cut food down, or you'll lose those excuses that you were so attached to of, I just can't do it. And that's an excuse. And that you become conditioned to saying, well, I just can't do it. So I challenge you to change that belief. And what is it that you actually want to believe? Thirdly, the third question is, who else other than you might be affected negatively if the change negatively if you change and get what you want? This could actually be around a family member, you know, your husband, wife, your children, and that you might lose a particular bond that you actually had with them. You know, you might, every night you sit down and you enjoy something together. And that there's a part of you that fears that is actually going to be lost if you do make these changes. So you're still holding on to that. And this is the opportunity when you can look at other things that you can bond over. You know, does it just have to be that one particular thing that you actually want to change, or can you work together to come up with something else that might interest you both, the two parties? So just looking at other options. So it might be possible that keeping the weight on or staying in self-limiting ways has had a positive intention for you. And it is actually coming from a loving place and to ensure that you feel safe. So we might even say that, you know, it's been a well-informed strategy all of these years, and habits have been a well-formed strategy all of these years to make sure that you feel like you're loved and you belong in certain circles. And so if it's actually been a key part of how you bond with others in your life, then it makes sense for your body to hold on to the habits, the weight to stop you from exercising or reaching your goals, because underlining all of this is the possibility that you might grow apart or no longer feel like you belong to someone who is important to you. So in order to begin to move away from that mindset is to first start by thanking that part of you. And I just want you guys to thank that part of you that has managed to ensure that you felt loved and you felt belonged this whole time. And just imagine that that part of you was put to work to actually do a job, and it's done an amazing job to keep you safe. And acknowledge that, to thank it, but its job is done now. And there's a new part of you that's coming through that you want to connect with, and it's an even more exciting part of you that you're going to connect with. And build up that feeling of excitement of where you guys are actually about to head, because it is exciting, and you're not losing a part of you. You're actually becoming into a greater, more inspiring, more stronger physically, mental self. Gradually you're going to get there, and it's all about just appreciating where we've actually come from. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video and you guys got something out of it. Looking forward to hearing everything about what you guys felt and how this kind of showed up in your life, and seeing your post on the video. So your job is now just to basically recognize when these scenarios do come up in their life. And it might not happen over the next 10 weeks, which is amazing too. But if it does, I just want to make sure that you guys are actually prepared for what's to come. Okay, guys, thank you. I'll see you soon. Bye.